The day my mother's secret changed everything for us. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My mother pressed a key into my palm and said, "Don't hate me." The plastic tag read Bayfield Storage C216. I'm Alex, 30, a night shift paramedic who buys groceries on sale and keeps jumper cables in my trunk because strangers stall at 2 a.m. My job taught me that secrets have pulses. They throb, they wait, and then one day they arrest your whole life mid-sentence. Mom, Elena, sat on the edge of her couch with quiet posture and the blue light of the TV pooling in her glasses. "It's time," she said, and the way her mouth shaped the word made it feel like church. Our living room smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. The family Bible lay open on the coffee table like it had been reading us while we weren't looking. I asked what the key opened, and she said, "Storage," like the word could behave if spoken softly. She slid a folded paper under it, a rental agreement with a start date I didn't recognize, and a monthly fee that could have been a week's groceries. On the signature line, her name was correct, but the emergency contact wasn't mine or my sister's. It was a man I'd never heard of, Michael Ruiz. She watched my eyes land on it and reached for my hand, stopping an explanation before it was born. "Please," she said, and the please sounded like a bruise. "There is something in C216 that needs my hands and not yours. I live 10 minutes away in a walk-up that smells like reheated onions and old paint. The sirens of my job follow me home. Even the radiator ticks like a cardiac monitor. I've learned to show up calm, speak plain, and keep people breathing until the ER doors open. But this wasn't a scene I could stabilize with gauze and a steady voice. I balanced bills on habit and pride. One bad month would kick my budget into a ditch. If Mom's secret dragged lawyers or creditors into the house we grew up in, I could lose the only steadiness we have left. "Mom," I said, "is anyone in danger?" She dabbed at the corner of her eye and answered with a question that didn't fit, the way pain sometimes shows up in a shoulder when the heart is failing. "Do you remember your 5th grade science fair?" I remembered the model volcano that never erupted and how Dad laughed kindly, then left for good 2 years later. "I learned then," she said, "that some messes look worse in public." She closed my fingers over the key. "Go tomorrow, before your shift." Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, an unknown number. She silenced it with the speed of a habit you don't discuss. Wind chimes outside went still as the breeze died. I promised to go, promised not to tell Tessa until I knew more, and promised myself I'd keep our family off the gossip altar if it killed me. When I hugged Mom goodnight, her shoulder bones felt sharp through her sweater, as if calcium had been traded for caution. I left with the key burning a square in my pocket and one question hammering my ribs. What did she lock away in C216 that needs my hands and not hers? What did my mother lock away that could ruin our names? When we were little, Mom kept certain drawers shut with rubber bands crossed like XS. Not locked, just signaled. Look elsewhere. She worked double shifts at the bakery, came home sugared and tired, and still found the breath to read us stories about ships and storms where ordinary people made it through. She was generous with groceries and stingy with explanations. "People are more than their worst day," she'd say, and turn the radio up during the news. I thought it was softness. Maybe it was armor. Dad left when I was 12. After he moved 2 states away, Mom tightened the budget in her mouth. She kept one photo of him out, wedding day, courthouse, a wild bouquet, and tucked the rest into a shoebox with tax records and warranty cards. If you asked about the past, she cooked. If you pushed, she cleaned. Our house shined when questions got loud. We learned the rules: celebrate birthdays, keep private things private, keep the lawn neat. The church ladies who traded casseroles also traded details, and Mom preferred feeding people to feeding rumors. When I got my EMT certification, she cried honest tears, then stitched her face back into calm like she'd offended someone by being proud. The uneasy thing started 2 weeks ago with a letter. I found it half open on the kitchen table, the flap lifted like a caught breath. Inside was a bill from St. Joseph's Clinic addressed to Elena Ruiz. Ruiz, not our name. And the amount was large. "Clerical error," Mom said, too fast. She folded it wrong and slid it under a cookbook. I told myself hospitals mess up names all the time. I told myself Ruiz was common. I told myself it was nothing. then caught myself checking the mailbox like a lifeguard scan of a crowded pool. That night, the landline rang, a number with our area code, no name, and Mom's shoulders rose like a cat. She let the machine take it. A man's voice, "Elena, it's me. Call back, please." He didn't say his name. I apologized to the air for eavesdropping and washed dishes that were already clean. I decided to let it pass for one day, just one more day, and then everything tilted when Tessa arrived early with a bag of scones and a question Mom couldn't swallow. Tessa had a name on her tongue that cracked everything open. The next morning, I stood in Mom's kitchen with sunshine on the linoleum and the storage key sweating against my palm like it had nerves. Tessa sat at the table tearing the corner off a napkin. "So," she said, eyes on Mom. "Who's Michael Ruiz?" The name slid across the room and stopped at the fridge magnets like it expected an answer. Mom didn't flinch. She poured coffee, steady as a nurse, and said, "A patient from the bakery days," which made no sense and too much sense. He needed a reference. Tessa and I looked at each other, the kind of look siblings wear when a parent says something impossible with confidence. On my way to the door, I noticed the sugar jar looked wrong. Our jar is glass with a chipped lid shaped like a tiny bird. That morning the bird faced backward, tail toward the room, like it had turned away in shame. It was nothing, I told myself, and then my hand lifted the lid like it had its own plan. Inside, beneath the bag of sugar, lay a brass key on a red ribbon labeled Unit 14B. There was a number I didn't recognize written in faded Sharpie on the ribbon's inside curve. I closed the jar. I opened the jar. I closed it again. My brain ran a siren I couldn't hear, just felt in the ribs. At St. Joseph's Clinic, I stopped by records after a transfer. I asked whether there was a patient named Elena Ruiz, and the clerk gave me the look that asks who I think I am. "HIPAA," she said, and turned her monitor away. I apologized and left, but in the hallway a bulletin board held a flyer for a charity fund with donors listed in tiny type. Near the bottom, E. Ruiz, monthly. The date line started 2 years ago and ticked forward like a metronome. I told myself to drop it. I drove to Bayfield Storage and sat in my car with the engine off, counting breaths like I tell my patients when their panic climbs the walls. I didn't go in. Instead, I watched a man in a suit carry boxes from C block to his trunk, glance around, and tear a label from one box with slow fingers. When he left, I left too, angry at myself for acting like a thief guarding someone else's secrets, and even angrier because I wanted to unlock them. I realized the sugar jar key wasn't the only thing backward. Escalation arrived the way storms do here. Sunny morning, then a bruise at the horizon. I took Mom to her cardiology follow-up because she hates waiting rooms alone, and because I needed an excuse to keep an eye on her phone. We sat beneath a television selling step counters and miracle pans. Mom's hands were folded, neat as receipts. "I'm fine," she said. "You hover." I smiled and changed the subject to the church rummage sale. She let me, which meant she was tired. On the way home, she asked to stop by the bank. 10 minutes, she said. I parked, and we walked past a poster that promised safe deposit peace of mind with a stock photo of a trustworthy vault. Inside, the manager greeted Mom by first name in a way that said regular, not rich. She signed for a small envelope, slid it into her purse, and when I tried to make a joke about fortunes, she squeezed my arm hard enough to mean later. Outside, a man leaned against a sedan, looked at Mom once, then looked away toward his phone like he'd practiced not seeing. That evening, Uncle Leon came for dinner with his toolbox because the porch light flickered. He smells like engine cleaner and cinnamon gum, a combination that transports me to every car he fixed when mine sounded sad. We ate baked chicken at the small table while the bulb above us pulsed like a heartbeat. "You look whipped, Elena," Leon said. "Start of allergies," Mom replied. He glanced at me in that way uncles learn, the one that asks whether to say the quiet thing out loud. I shrugged. The bulb steadied, then flickered again. And then the knock came. 1 rap, pause, 2 raps like a code. Mom froze mid-reach for the salt. I opened the door. A woman in a gray blazer held a manila envelope and introduced herself as a process server, voice gentle, like she was entering a hospital room. "For Elena Ruiz," she said, eyes sliding to my mother. A beat. Then Mom stood and took it with the kind of grace that belongs at weddings. Tessa, who had just texted on my way, arrived in time to watch the envelope open along its glue seam. Inside was a summons that turned dinner into a courtroom without exits. The summons named a hearing date and a case number that looked like a license plate. The words were plain and heavy: Financial Guardianship Review. Tessa went red at the cheeks. "What is this?" she asked, voice small, hands big. Mom folded the paper back into the envelope with the same care she used for our permission slips. "It's a mistake," she said, and for the first time I heard the thin wire of fear under her words. We argued quietly because the windows were open and Mrs. Doherty next door collects stories like teacups. Tessa said we were scaring Mom. That questions could wait. That stress was bad for blood pressure. I said truth doesn't raise blood pressure, lies do. Uncle Leon chewed the end of his glasses and finally said, "Secrets grow teeth." He looked at Mom with brother eyes. "Who is Michael Ruiz?" Mom pinned the envelope with her palm as if it might fly away. "No one you need to worry about," she said, which meant worry now. That night Tessa texted me paragraphs that began with love and ended with instructions. "Stop digging," she wrote. "She raised us. We owe her peace." I typed and deleted, and finally replied, "We owe her safety." She didn't answer. I barely slept. In the morning, Mom said she had an errand. I offered to drive. She refused. I followed anyway, 2 cars back, ashamed and unwilling to stop. Courthouse records office, then the bank, then home by a route she never takes. In the driveway she cried, quiet, steady, soaking her collar. I watched from the corner and felt like both her son and her shadow. I waited under the maple and watched the mailbox flag rise, fall, rise again like a signal I couldn't read. Leon's words stayed. Secrets grow teeth, and they rot roots. I thought of rent due next week and how one fee could pull a thread through our budget until the whole sweater unwound. I thought of Dad's shoebox of photos and how silence smudged his face into a stranger. When I stepped from the shadows, Mom looked at me like a witness. I stood in the driveway, visible now, and asked the question I had practiced all night. "Mom, do you need help?" She nodded like a slow hinge. "I need you to be patient," she said, "and to trust my timing." The envelope from the court lived on the seat of the porch swing like a guest that wouldn't leave. "I can't trust timing I don't know," I said. "Tell me who Michael Ruiz is." She pressed her lips together, then surprised me. "He's family," she said, and my name went missing for a second. "Not the way you think, but not a stranger either." Her eyes shone. I promised I would help him until he could help himself. I asked how long she'd been sending money. She said, 2 years, and didn't blink. "Monthly," I said, remembering the donor list. "Sometimes more," she added, quiet as a folded note. Tessa's car rolled into the curb. She came up the walk fast, hair in a clip, indignation already dressed. "This is harassment," she said, pointing at me without meanness. "Mom doesn't need an interrogation." Mom exhaled. "I need truth," she said, spine straightening to its old height. She took my hand and Tessa's, placed them together like a bridge. "You will learn everything soon," she said, "but not by yelling." Uncle Leon knocked once, then let himself in with a bag of groceries like a peace treaty. "Soup," he announced, "because in our family soup means we keep talking without shouting." We sat, bowls steaming, and I watched Mom tuck a loose hair behind her ear like she does when she's about to give bad news the dignity of neatness. "There is a key in the sugar," she said, and Tessa's spoon stopped midair. "You will use it today." I told her about Bayfield storage. She nodded like that, too, was part of a plan older than my fear. "Take Leon," she said. "Go now." Tessa started to object, but Mom lifted a palm. "Please," she said, and the word decided us. We left the soup on the table and drove in silence that felt louder than sirens, because silence with meaning has weight. At a red light, Leon said, "Alex, listen. When you open that door, open your heart too." The light changed, and we rolled forward toward C Block with a key and a tremor. As we turned in, a familiar sedan slid into the lot and idled like it had been waiting for us to arrive. C216 smelled like cardboard, dust, and a memory I hadn't met yet. The metal door rattled up, and morning light slid over neat rows of bankers' boxes labeled in Mom's crisp hand. Insurance, tax, school, medical. On the back wall sat a gray plastic tote with a red lid that didn't match. Its label, photos. Leon crouched and whistled low. "She keeps a tidy past," he said. I opened box 1, insurance. Policies for the house, the car, beneficiary lines that listed Tessa and me. No surprises. Box 2. Tax returns and W-2s. Box 3. School art projects, Mother's Day cards in crayon. My own volcano rubric lay there with a teacher's kind B+. The gray toad-held albums, then a manila envelope taped shut with blue painter's tape. On the front, for Alex, open if necessary. Seems necessary, Leon said, but I paused, hearing Mom's voice in my head. Some messes look worse in public. I peeled the tape and slid out a stack of documents. A notarized letter, copies of cashier's checks to St. Joseph's Charity Fund, and a printed email thread with subject lines that stepped forward like footprints. Assistance. Thank you. One more moth. The signature block read, Michael Ruiz, Program Coordinator. A photo clipped to the top showed a man in his 30s with my father's chin and the eyes I see in my barber's mirror. Leon saw it too and grabbed the shelf to steady himself. He didn't finish. Beneath the letter were copies of birth records. One was mine. One was Tessa's. The third listed Elena as mother and the line for father, left blank. The baby's last name, Ruiz. Date, 3 years before my birth. A small sealed jewelry box rested at the bottom. Inside, a hospital bracelet in plastic, tiny, printed with Elena/boy. My stomach sank like an elevator. Leon put a hand on my shoulder. Your mother, he said slowly, had a son before you. The sedan outside turned off, and footsteps approached the corrugated door like a clock you can't stop. I slid the bracelet back into its little box as the footsteps paused outside. A polite knock on the metal startled both of us. I lifted the door a foot. A pair of careful shoes stood there, attached to a man with a file folder and a tentative smile that had practiced failing. Alex, he asked, and the syllable felt like he'd rehearsed it. I'm Michael. He said it softly, as if volume could spoil a promise. Leon stepped forward, protective, but I raised a palm. The resemblance was a slow-arriving train. The longer I looked, the more features lined up. Jawline, the way the right eyebrow lifts when uncertain. He held out the folder. I asked your mother if we could meet, he said. She said not yet, but circumstances changed. He explained that he wasn't a scammer and that the charity account was his job, not his cover. I grew up in foster care, he said. A closed adoption. When I aged out, I started looking. The clinic job was coincidence that became a lead. He met Mom at the records office where he volunteered to help people untangle bills. She recognized my name, he said, half smile becoming a flinch. Then she saw my face. The Guardian Review? He said it was a protective filing initiated by someone else to block further payments. Not to control her, but to force disclosure. Someone else? I asked. An estranged relative of your father, he said. A busybody with access to old paperwork. He winced. I think she was trying to protect you, but she went nuclear. He wasn't asking for money, he said. He had a steady job and a group apartment. I wanted medical history, he added. And, if she wanted, contact. We stood between boxes and a truth that rearranged the family tree. Why the name Ruiz? I asked. He laughed once, without joy. The social worker typed it wrong from a phone call, he said. It stuck like a nickname, you don't shake. Leon nodded, eyes kind. You got proof. Michael opened the folder. DNA test request forms mailed, but never used. A letter from the state with non-identifying details that matched Mom's age, hospital, month. He raised his eyes. She's been helping because she thought she failed me once, he said. She didn't want to fail again. A car door slammed outside, and a voice I knew from every childhood argument called my name through the echoing corridor. Tessa strode into the corridor like a verdict. Alex. She called, heels sharp, breath quick. When she reached the unit and saw Michael, she stopped hard, then moved again with purpose. No, she said, palming the door down to shoulder height, like she could keep the past from ducking under. I lifted it back up. Tess, I said, this is Michael. We're leaving, she said, as if language were a rope she could pull me by. Leon cleared his throat. Let's listen. Tessa turned to Michael. If you're a journalist, don't you dare. He shook his head and told the story again, shorter, and showed the bracelet without touching it. Tessa stared at the plastic like it might confess. Why now, she asked. Because the court date will force everything public anyway, he said. I wanted you to hear it in a room, not a hallway. I thought about publicness. How much of our life was curated privacy, clean lawn, church casseroles, measured smiles? Mom knew. Tessa asked, voice shivering. Yes, I said gently. She blinked fast, swallowing rocks. She should have told us, she whispered. We would have helped. Leon said. Pride breeds silence. And we all looked at the floor because sometimes the truth shouldn't make eye contact. I opened the manila envelope, slid out the notarized letter, and read, If this is in your hands, it is because I could not find the right morning to say a hard thing without making breakfast taste like grief. The letter explained that Mom had a child at 19, under pressure, no support, no money. She kept his name secret because the people who judged loudest were the ones who offered no help. Decades later, chance put Michael in her path. She chose support now as a way to honor what she couldn't do then. The letter asked me to protect Tessa from shame and to protect Michael from becoming a headline in our zip code. This doesn't excuse lying, Tessa said, clutching the paper, but it explains it. Her phone chimed, Mom's name. A text, please come home. I'm ready to tell you everything. Tessa looked up at me, then at Michael, then at Leon, and said, steady. If we do this, we do it right. Then her screen lit again with a number from the hospital, and the nurse's voice in my head said code words I've learned to dread. We drove to Mom's house in a caravan, me and Leon in front, Tessa and Michael behind. I called Mom. No answer. The porch light, finally fixed, glowed like a small moon at the wrong time of day. Inside, her purse sat on the chair, phone on top, screen face down. The kettle clicked, cooling on the stove. Mom, I called, paramedic voice already buckling into its training. Bathroom, empty. Bedroom, bedmade. Back door, ajar by an inch, a breeze lifting the curtain like breath. In the yard, Mrs. Doherty watered her peonies, aiming the hose like a question. She left in a cab, she said helpfully. Nice driver. Said hospital. My stomach free fell. We got back into cars. I turned on lights and siren privileges I rarely use off shift and prayed no one would ask later. At St. Joseph's, the ER clerk recognized me and didn't make me beg. Room 6, she said. Mom lay in a bed with wires like tinsel, color better than my fear expected. It's a scare, the resident said, reading my face with practiced calm. Chest pain, likely anxiety and dehydration. Enzymes negative. She needs rest and maybe fewer secrets. Mom smiled at that like she'd paid for the joke. I called you, she said to Tessa. Then a wave hit me and I panicked. We gathered around. Michael stepped in last, stopped at the foot of the bed, hands visible like he'd learned to look harmless. Mom's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. Michael, she said, voice thick with 30-some years. He nodded, swallowed. Hi, Mom, he said, and the word ricocheted through the room and found me standing, a son and a brother, steadying. We let them talk first, small sentences, big breaths. After a while, Mom turned to us. We'll do this properly, she said. No lies, no back doors. I told her about the storage unit, the bracelet, the letter. She closed her eyes and exhaled like a prayer she'd carried too long finally left. The resident lifted a brow at me, the look that says, there will be paperwork, prepare. A nurse came with a clipboard for next of kin updates and medical directives. And that's when the practical problem rose like a tide we had waited too long to notice. Who has medical power of attorney? The nurse asked. Mom and I looked at each other as the clipboard's silence measured the gap between love and law. We discharged at dusk with follow-up instructions and a list of numbers that could keep a small town alive. Mom refused a wheelchair. We compromised with my arm. At home we gathered in the living room, shades half drawn. Uncle Leon brewed tea like it could officiate this meeting. Tessa brought out the court envelope and placed it on the table between coasters like a centerpiece. We need a plan, she said, voice steady in a way I trusted to hold roofs through storms. Mom nodded. Attorney Shaw, she said, surprising me. He helped Mrs. D'Angelo with her probate mess. He's discreet. Leon dialed, asked for a next day slot, used the words sensitive family matter, which open calendars in ways money can't. Shaw agreed to an early appointment. Bring documents, he said through the speaker. Bring receipts. Bring dates. We had those. I organized the copies from the unit into 3 piles: financial transfers, medical notes, and identity records. We cross-checked months and amounts with Mom's bank statements. No missing chunks, No predatory cousins in the margins. Tessa's hands shook once and then steadied as she wrote a timeline on yellow legal paper. Michael sat at the edge of the couch like a polite question mark. I don't want to break anything, he said. You didn't. I told him, and believed it enough to say it twice. Mom took his hand. You didn't, she echoed, and the echo sounded like courage this time. We rehearsed what to say to Shah, who would ask hard questions about intention, capacity, and consent. We agreed on 2 goals: legal clarity before gossip and safety before shame. Leon cleared his throat. Tomorrow, he said. We put the truth on paper and let it stand. We cleaned up, wept a little, laughed once at a joke about hospital pudding. Then, as I walked Michael to the door, motion flashed across the window, a silhouette, close to the glass, staying too long to be curiosity. The porch board creaked without footsteps following, and a car idled with its lights off at the end of the street, like a thought someone didn't want to own. Attorney Shah's office smelled like books and lemon oil, an old-fashioned kind of honesty. He was lean and calm, with glasses that made everything look like it would eventually fit on one page. We sat. He listened. We gave him the bracelet, the letter, the payment records, the dates from the charity's receipt emails. He asked 3 questions that mattered more than any moral monologue. Elena, did anyone coerce you to pay? No. Did you understand your finances when you paid? Yes. Do you want contact with Michael? Mom looked at Michael and nodded. Small, sure. Shah tapped his pen and said the guardianship petition was likely protective theater by someone worried about exploitation. We can rebut with capacity assessments, bank statements, and a formal care plan, he said. Transparency cures suspicion. He recommended we file a voluntary disclosure, an affidavit outlining the relationship, the payments, and the plan going forward. Limited support if requested, boundaries in writing, no cash, no secrets. He also suggested medical power of attorney updates with both me and Tessa listed, first and alternate. Reduces chaos, he said, and we all exhaled like appliances settling after a power surge. Then Shah asked about the car outside the storage unit. Michael described the sedan. Tessa described the silhouette at our window. Shah frowned. If the petitioner hired a private investigator to document transactions, expect more eyes, he said. Stay boring and lawful. We signed engagement letters. As we stood to leave, the conference room monitor blinked alive from sleep, showing the desktop where Shah would project exhibits at tomorrow's informal conference with the petitioner's counsel. On the screen, he pulled up the receipt PDFs, the physician's note, and the notarized letter, evidence lining up like good soldiers. He clicked to the last file we provided, a scanned envelope from decades ago. The return address blurred, then sharpened, and Tessa inhaled like she'd stepped into cold ocean. It was our father's old handwriting, postmarked a month after Michael's birth, addressed to Elena, never opened. Shah looked at Mom. Would you like to open it now? He asked. She shook her head once, then placed the envelope on the table and slid her thumb under the paper without breaking eye contact with any of us. The letter inside was short. Our father wrote that he knew about the pregnancy, that he had panicked, that he could not be the man he should be, that he would send money when I can, and that Elena should not ruin her life by telling anyone. There was a cashier's check stub stapled to the corner, 1 payment only. Silence washed through the room. He left you with the weight, I said, anger arriving late but hot. Mom folded the paper back into the envelope like laying a flower on a grave that didn't deserve the bloom. He was young, she said softly. So was I. Shah set the letter aside. This clarifies motive, he said. It also helps rebut any claim that a third party manipulated you recently. The manipulation happened then. We returned home with copies, a plan, and a fatigue that felt like we'd run a marathon carrying furniture. News travels faster than cars in our neighborhood. By evening, Mrs. Doherty brought over banana bread with an expression that said she knew something without knowing what it was. I thanked her and closed the door gently. After dinner, my supervisor called. Could I cover an early shift due to a short-staffed morning? I hesitated, looked at my family, said yes. Bills don't stop for epiphanies. At dawn, I left instructions for meds and breakfast, kissed Mom's forehead, and stepped into the cool. Mid-shift, between a fall on maple and a chest pain on birch, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Then a text from Shah. Conference moved up. Petitioner present. Bring Elena if possible. I radioed for coverage and tore back home. Tessa already had the car warmed. Mom wore her good sweater. Michael held the folder. Outside, a different car waited with its lights on, and as we pulled out, it tucked in behind us like a shadow that had paid rent. The courthouse conference room was beige, fluorescent, and full of people pretending not to have hearts. On one side sat Shaw and us. On the other, a woman with a lawyer, jaw set, hair sprayed into an argument. She introduced herself, our father's cousin, Nancy, family in the way weeds are related to flowers. I filed to protect Elena from a predator, she said, nodding at Michael in a way that curdled milk. Shaw slid the documents across the table, one by one. Receipts, bank statements, physician's note, Elena's affidavit. He kept his voice even. There is no exploitation, he said. There is a mother and an adult son establishing contact with appropriate boundaries. Nancy's lawyer examined the pages. Nancy crossed her arms tighter. Shaw saved the letter from our father for last. He placed it between us like a mirror. Nancy read. Her mouth lost its fight for a beat. He told you not to tell, she said to Mom, a whisper threaded with accusation and envy. He told me to carry his secrecy, Mom replied. And I did until I couldn't. Tessa reached for Mom's hand. Michael sat very still, dignity his only shield. The bank officer joined via video and verified the pattern of payments and Elena's consistent balances. No distress, no overdrafts, no loans. Shaw closed with a proposed order. Petition withdrawn, confidentiality respected, medical POA updated, and a simple note entered sealing non-essential details from public view. The room breathed. Nancy stared at me. And you, she said, parading this circus, risking your mother's soul to play hero. I said, I'm a paramedic. My job is to keep people breathing until truth arrives. Shaw coughed into his sleeve, maybe to hide a smile. The court liaison nodded, said she'd recommend acceptance. Papers shuffled. Chairs scraped. We stood. In the hallway, Nancy stepped close, hissed. Your father would never have allowed this. I looked at her, the past volunteer spokesperson, and felt the weight loosen from my ribs. He's not here, I said, steady. We are. A door clicked open behind us, and an officer called my name with urgency I recognized from emergencies I cannot ignore. Mom had slumped gently into a chair while we waited for the stamped orders. Her color had faded, and her breath had shortened. I dropped to a knee, counting respirations, feeling for pulse, noting skin, asking questions without panic. Dizzy. A little. Chest pain. More like a squeeze. I flagged the officer, asked for water, loosened the sweater at the neck, and kept my voice level, the way I do at 3 a.m. on linoleum floors. Shaw fetched a nurse from the family court clinic. Tessa kept Mom talking about the church rummage sale because normal words anchored drifting minds. Michael stood back, but not away, hands clasped, eyes wet. Vitals stabilized. We canceled the ambulance. 10 minutes later, the clerk handed over stamped agreements like diplomas from a school we never wanted to attend. Outside, the day had the clean light of beginnings. We went home together, put on a kettle, and sat around the table where soup had cooled and decisions had hardened into kindness. We wrote new routines on paper, weekly check-ins, shared passwords for emergencies, a spending plan that included a small monthly gift to Michael's savings with receipts and rules. Mom signed medical power of attorney forms listing Tessa first, me second, because she said I run toward other people's emergencies for a living. She wanted Tessa to run toward hers. I accepted that without bruising, surprised by the relief of not always being first. Therapy appointments went on the calendar. Grief, shame, strength, the usual complicated soup. We cleaned the storage unit, keeping photos, shredding old bills, saving the bracelet in a velvet bag to pass to the person it belonged to. That night, after dishes, Mom stood at the sink and looked out the window at the quiet street. I thought love meant carrying things alone, she said. Turns out it meant letting you carry me. I dried the last plate and felt the house exhale as if it, too, had been bracing.